We were in the cereal aisle at Target when my 7-year-old son spoke his first full sentence. Not his first word. We'd gotten Mama 2 years ago, after 5 years of silence and thousands of hours of therapy. We'd celebrated like he'd won the lottery because to us he had. But a full sentence. That wasn't supposed to happen. Not according to the neurologist who'd told me to manage my expectations. Not according to the developmental pediatrician who'd suggested residential care. Not according to my ex-husband who'd walked out because he couldn't handle raising a defective child. Caspian stood there, 7 years old, clutching his favorite blue bear, looking up at the rows of colorful boxes. His dark curls were wild because he hated having his hair brushed. His Thomas the Train shirt was on backwards because that's how he needed it to feel right. And he looked at me with those storm gray eyes and said, clear as daylight, "Mom, can we get the one with the dinosaur on it?" The purple box. 3rd shelf. The woman next to us gasped. An elderly man stopped his cart to stare. A teenager pulled out her phone like she was witnessing a miracle. And me. I dropped to my knees right there in the cereal aisle and sobbed so hard I couldn't breathe. Because they'd told me this would never happen. That my son would never communicate. Never connect. Never be more than a burden I'd carry alone for the rest of my life. They were wrong about everything. Let me show you how. If you believe every child deserves a chance no matter what the experts say, hit that subscribe button. Because this is a story about what happens when a mother refuses to accept that her child is broken just because the world can't understand him. My name is Zinnia Castellano. I'm 34 years old. And 7 years ago, my entire world shattered and rebuilt itself in the space of a 15-minute doctor's appointment. Caspian was 18 months old. Beautiful, curious, developing normally according to every milestone chart. He'd been saying mama and dada and more since he was 10 months old. He loved music, animals, building blocks. Then, around 15 months, something changed. The words stopped. Eye contact disappeared. He started lining up his toys obsessively, same order every time, screaming if anyone moved them. He'd rock back and forth for hours, humming the same 3 notes. My husband Dimitri said it was a phase. Boys develop slower, he insisted. He's fine. But I knew something was wrong. Mother's intuition, people call it. More like mother's terror when you watch your child slip away into a world you can't reach. The pediatrician referred us to a developmental specialist. Dr. Helena Marsh. I'll never forget her name because I'll never forget sitting in her sterile office while she delivered our future like a prison sentence. Caspian meets the diagnostic criteria for autism spectrum disorder. Severe, based on his current presentation. Nonverbal, low social engagement, significant sensory processing issues. The words felt like stones dropping into my chest. Each one heavier than the last. What does that mean? Dimitri asked. Like long-term. Dr. Marsh folded her hands on her desk. No warmth in her expression. Just clinical detachment. It means he'll likely never develop functional language. He'll need constant supervision, potentially for life. I recommend you start researching residential care options now, before the wait lists get too long. There are excellent facilities that specialize in. He's 18 months old. My voice sounded far away. You're giving up on him at 18 months. I'm being realistic, Ms. Castellano. I know this isn't what you want to hear, but false hope helps no one. Children with this severity level rarely achieve independence. The sooner you accept that, the easier it will be to make appropriate plans. Dimitri was silent the entire drive home. So was I. What do you say when someone tells you your child's life is essentially over before it's really begun? That night, I held Caspian while he screamed. He did that sometimes for no reason I could identify. Just screamed and screamed until his voice gave out. Dimitri stood in the doorway watching us. I can't do this, he said quietly. Do what? This. I can't spend my life caring for someone who'll never even know who I am. I stared at my husband. The man who'd promised, in sickness and in health. The man who'd cried when Caspian was born, called him perfect, said he'd never loved anything more. He's your son. He's broken, Zinnia. And I didn't sign up for broken. He left 3 days later. Packed his things while Caspian had a meltdown in the corner, banging his head against the wall because the vacuum cleaner sound hurt his ears and he couldn't tell us why. Dimitri stepped over him on his way out. Literally stepped over his screaming son without looking back. The divorce papers came 2 weeks after that. He wanted no custody, no visitation. Just a clean break from the situation. His lawyer called Caspian a situation in legal documents. My mother called with advice the day I signed the papers. Honey, have you thought about what Dr. Marsh said? About the homes. It's not giving up. It's being practical. Or young. You could start over. Have another baby. A healthy one. Caspian is healthy. He's just different. He's never going to have a normal life. Neither are you if you don't make the hard choice. The hard choice is fighting for him. That's what I'm doing. Zinnia. Hung up. Didn't talk to my mother for 6 months after that. But I understood in a terrible way. Everyone was trying to lower my expectations. Prepare me for disappointment. Convince me to let go. They thought they were being kind. They didn't understand that lowering expectations is just another way of giving up. The next 5 years were war. War with the school district who wanted to put Caspian in a segregated classroom with no inclusion. War with insurance companies who denied every therapy that might actually help. War with therapists who treated him like he couldn't understand, talking over him like he wasn't in the room. War with family members who kept suggesting maybe Dr. Marsh was right. War with my own exhaustion, my own doubt, my own terror that maybe I was being selfish keeping him home when I could barely afford groceries. I worked 3 jobs. Medical billing from home during nap time. Weekend shifts at a coffee shop. Night shifts entering data for a logistics company. 4 hours of sleep was a luxury. The therapies insurance wouldn't cover, I paid out of pocket. Speech therapy 3 times a week. Occupational therapy for his sensory issues. Applied behavior analysis 40 hours a week at $120 an hour. I was drowning in debt. Medical bills stacked on the kitchen counter. Credit cards maxed. Eviction notices. Disconnection warnings. But Caspian was progressing. Slowly, incrementally, but progressing. At age 3, he started using picture cards to communicate. Point to hungry. Point to hurt. Point to scared. At age 4, he tolerated wearing different clothes. Still backwards, still specific textures, but progress. At age 5, after 3 years of speech therapy with a saint named Rhiannon who refused to give up on him, he said, "Mama," again. I'd been hearing that word in my dreams for 3 years. Waking up thinking I heard it, only to find silence. But that Tuesday afternoon in Rhiannon's office, with autumn sun streaming through the window, Caspian looked directly at me and said it. "Mama." Clear. Intentional. Perfect. Rhiannon cried. Caspian looked confused by our reaction but let me hug him, which was its own miracle. The school district wasn't impressed. At his kindergarten IEP meeting, they presented their recommendations. Separate classroom. Separate lunch. Separate everything. For his safety and the safety of other students. Other students aren't in danger from my son, I said, trying to keep my voice level. He's nonviolent. He just communicates differently. The special education director, a woman named Mrs. Chen who'd clearly decided Caspian's fate before meeting him, sighed like I was being difficult. "Ms. Castellano, we have to be realistic about Caspian's capabilities. He's functionally nonverbal. He said mama last month. He's learning sign language. He uses his communication device. 1 word in 5 years isn't functional communication. And the device is a crutch that prevents him from developing real speech." I wanted to flip the table. Instead, I said very calmly, "I'm requesting a full inclusion classroom with appropriate supports as guaranteed by federal law under IDEA. I'm also requesting a trained aid, speech services, and accommodations for his sensory needs." Mrs. Chen smiled. The smile you give someone who's about to lose. We can certainly discuss that. But I want you to understand that inclusion isn't always in the child's best interest. Sometimes separate is better, safer, less stressful for everyone involved. I hired an advocate. Tobias, a former special ed teacher who'd gone into advocacy after watching too many kids get warehoused in segregated classrooms. He was worth every penny I didn't have. At the next IEP meeting, with Tobias beside me, we got everything. Full inclusion, trained aid, speech services, occupational therapy. Every accommodation Caspian needed. Mrs. Chen looked like she'd swallowed glass signing those papers. But I didn't care about her feelings. I cared about my son having a chance. Kindergarten was brutal. Caspian had a wonderful teacher, Ms. Kowalski, who actually saw him as a child instead of a diagnosis. But the other kids didn't understand why he didn't talk, why he covered his ears during fire drills, why he needed to line up his crayons before starting any work. Some were curious, asked questions, wanted to help. Others were cruel, called him weird, stupid, robot boy. 6-year-olds can be monsters. But Caspian had one friend, a girl named Amara, who decided on day one that Caspian was the most interesting person in the whole class. She learned basic sign language to talk to him. She let him stim without judgment. She translated for him when other kids didn't understand his communication device. Caspian says he wants to play blocks. She'd announce with absolute authority. And he wants the red ones because red is calm today. I sobbed when Miss Kowalski told me about Amara. Happy tears for once. At home we had different challenges. Caspian's meltdowns were worse. The demands of school, the sensory overload, the social exhaustion, all of it exploded when he got home. He'd scream, bang his head, scratch his arms until they bled. I learned to pad the walls in his room, keep his nails trimmed short, hold him safely when he couldn't hold himself. People who've never dealt with autism meltdowns don't understand. They think it's a tantrum, something that can be disciplined away. It's not. It's a neurological storm. His brain overloading. His body trying to regulate itself the only way it knows how. All I could do was keep him safe and wait for it to pass. Those nights were the hardest. Sitting on the floor with my son, both of us exhausted and scared, wondering if I was doing right by him or ruining him by keeping him in a world that didn't want to understand him. Then first grade happened. New teacher. Mrs. Brighton. Traditional. Old school. Believed in tough love and not coddling. She refused to use Caspian's communication device. Said he was manipulating us by not speaking. Told me he needed more discipline and less enabling. Filed a complaint. She retaliated by marking Caspian's behavior as disruptive every single day. We were in IEP meetings monthly. Me and Tobias against Mrs. Brighton and Mrs. Chen, fighting for basic accommodations that were already in his legally binding plan. He's making the other students uncomfortable, Mrs. Brighton said in one meeting. How? Yes. He rocks. He hums. He doesn't make eye contact. The other children find it strange. And which of those behaviors actually disrupts learning? She had no answer. Because there wasn't one. She just didn't want him there. I was one bad meeting away from pulling him out entirely when something shifted. Rhiannon, his speech therapist, had been trying a new approach. Combining sign language, the communication device, and verbal approximations. Building a bridge between all his methods of communication. One afternoon, during a particularly rough session where Caspian was frustrated and overstimulated, he looked at Rhiannon and signed "help," while simultaneously pressing the button on his device. Then he opened his mouth and said, "Help." Rhiannon called me immediately. "Zinnia, we need to talk about something. I think Caspian's been capable of more speech than we realized. He's just been processing how to access it." Over the next 6 months, Caspian's vocabulary exploded. 5 words, then 10, then 20. Simple phrases. Want snack. Go outside. Love you, mama. Every new word felt like watching him break through a wall. Each one proof that everyone who'd given up on him was wrong. By the end of first grade, he was using 3 to 4 word sentences regularly. Still supplementing with signs and his device, but speaking. Actually speaking. Mrs. Brighton couldn't explain it. Didn't try. Just started treating him like any other student. Progress. Second grade brought Ms. Delgado. Young, energetic, actually trained in inclusive education. She was everything Caspian needed. She taught the whole class about different ways people communicate. Made everyone learn basic sign language. Celebrated Caspian's progress publicly. And Caspian bloomed. More words. Longer sentences. Jokes. Questions. Opinions. He told me about his day at school. Actual details. Who he played with. What he learned. How the cafeteria was too loud, but Amara let him eat lunch in the quiet corner with her. Ms. Delgado says I'm smart, he told me one night at dinner. 7 words. The longest sentence he'd ever spoken. You are smart, baby. So smart. The other kids say I'm weird. My heart broke. What do you think? He considered that serious expression he got when processing something important. I think I'm different. Different isn't bad. Just different. 7 years old and already wiser than half the adults I knew. By third grade, Caspian was reading at grade level. His comprehension was actually above grade level. He loved books about space and dinosaurs and how things worked. He'd read aloud to me at night, stumbling over some words, nailing others. His voice was beautiful. I'd spent 5 years wondering if I'd ever hear it. And now he was reading me stories about astronauts and ancient lizards. The school district did his triennial evaluation that year. Mrs. Chen, who hadn't spoken to me directly since the advocacy meetings, sat across from me with the results. Caspian's scores have improved significantly, she said, and I heard the surprise in her voice. His verbal abilities are now in the average range. His academic performance is grade-level appropriate across all subjects. His social skills have developed remarkably. So what you're saying is, he's not the hopeless case you thought he was. She had the decency to look uncomfortable. We're recommending continuing his current supports. They seem to be working well. No apology. No acknowledgement of how hard she'd fought against those supports. Just bureaucratic language covering her ass. But I didn't need her apology. I had something better. I had my son thriving, learning, growing. Proof that she'd been wrong. That's when Target happened. Caspian had been working on expressing preferences clearly. Rhiannon had been coaching him on longer, more complex sentences. But we practiced in therapy. In safe spaces. He'd never done it in public. Never with the sensory chaos of a busy store. Standing in that cereal aisle. Hearing him speak a full grammatically correct sentence. Watching strangers' faces shift from pity to amazement, I understood what we'd accomplished. We hadn't fixed Caspian. He was never broken. We'd just given him the tools to show the world what he'd always been capable of. Last month, Caspian's school did an assembly about neurodiversity. Students were invited to share their experiences. Talk about their challenges and strengths. Caspian volunteered. I sat in the audience, surrounded by parents who used to stare at my son like he was a disruption, and watched him walk to the microphone. He was nervous. I could see it in how he clutched his cards, how he rocked slightly on his feet. But when he spoke, his voice was clear. Hi. My name is Caspian Castellano. I'm 8 years old. I have autism. When I was little, doctors said I would never talk. Never go to a regular school. Never have friends. They told my mom to put me in a home because I was too hard to raise. My mom said no. She fought for me when I couldn't fight for myself. She learned sign language. She drove me to therapy 5 times a week. She didn't sleep because she was working to pay for my therapies. She never gave up, even when I couldn't say thank you. Now I can say thank you. So I'm saying it. Thank you, Mom. For seeing me when nobody else did. Autism makes some things harder for me. I don't always understand jokes. Loud noises hurt. Looking at people's eyes feels wrong. But it also makes some things easier. I remember everything I read. I notice patterns other people miss. Think in pictures. I'm not broken. I'm just different. And different is okay. The applause was deafening. Parents were crying. Teachers were crying. I was definitely crying. But Caspian just smiled, gave a little wave, and walked back to his seat next to Amara. Like it was no big deal that he just delivered a speech to 200 people. Like he hadn't spent 5 years of his life without words. After the assembly, Mrs. Chen approached me. First time in 3 years. Ms. Castellano. That was remarkable. Yes, it was. I have to admit, when I first met Caspian, I didn't see this outcome as possible. I may have underestimated him. May have. Not definitely did. Not I was wrong. Just may have. He's the same kid he always was, Mrs. Chen. You just didn't bother to look close enough. She nodded, uncomfortable, and walked away. I didn't need her validation anymore. I had Caspian's voice. His laughter. His questions about why stars die and whether dinosaurs had feelings and if we could get a dog. That was enough. Today, Caspian is 8 years old. He's in 3rd grade, fully included, thriving. He has friends. He reads chapter books. He tells elaborate stories about the video games he plays. He still has hard days. Days when the world is too bright, too loud, too much. Days when words won't come no matter how hard he tries. Days when his body won't cooperate with what his brain wants to do. But he has tools now. Strategies. Support. A mother who will fight anyone who suggests he's less than extraordinary. We're not rich. I'm still working multiple jobs. The medical bills haven't disappeared. But we have enough. We have each other. We have hope. And Caspian has something more valuable than any of that. He has his voice. His way of seeing the world. His perfect, different, beautiful self. The doctors who said he'd never speak. They were wrong. The husband who said he was broken. He was wrong. The school district that wanted to segregate him. They were wrong. My mother who said I should give up. She was wrong. She's apologized since, by the way. Actually said the words, I was wrong about him. About you. Every single person who thought Caspian's autism meant he had nothing to offer the world was wrong. Not because he overcame autism. He's still autistic. He always will be. But because they measured him against their narrow definition of success and decided he didn't fit. They forgot that different doesn't mean less. Before I go, I want to say something to every parent who's been told their child will never achieve, never improve, never be more than their diagnosis. Those people are wrong. Not sometimes. Not maybe. Wrong. Your child is not a collection of deficits. They're a human being with their own timeline, their own path, their own way of experiencing the world. And if you fight for them, if you believe in them, if you refuse to accept that they're limited by someone else's low expectations, you'll be amazed at what they can do. Caspian taught me that. He taught me that persistence isn't just stubbornness. It's love in action. It's refusing to let the world make your child invisible. So to every parent in the trenches right now, fighting with school districts and insurance companies and well-meaning relatives who suggest giving up, keep fighting. Your kid is worth it. Even on the hard days. Especially on the hard days. And to every person who's ever been told they're too autistic or too disabled or too different to matter. You matter. Your voice matters. Your way of being in the world matters. Never let anyone convince you otherwise. If this story resonated with you, or if you're fighting for a child who everyone else has given up on, please share it. Your share could give another parent the courage to keep going. Subscribe for more stories about people who refuse to accept the limitations others tried to place on them. And remember, different isn't less, just different.